Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm kind of winging it, holding a tripod out in front of me today, and it's getting almost dark, so I am going to show you really quickly just cleaning up around a few of the trees and shrubs in the grocery row garden, and then we're going to continue this adventure as we go through the rest of it and clean it up over the next few days, mosquitoes permitting. So the trains were coming by, and we also had a party going on next door with a bunch of loud music. So I'm going to give you a radio voiceover over what I'm doing here in the grocery row garden. Now you can hardly see it at this point, but the little tree I'm trying to clear around is a loquat. It's just a loquat seedling. I don't think it's any particularly good variety. If you get a improved variety of loquat, they have big sweet fruits, but even the unimproved varieties that you usually see, the seedling loquats that people often just plant as an ornamental, they do have good fruits. They just tend to be a little more sour and more pit than the improved varieties. So I'm chopping down these lettuces right here. These are just wild lettuce, and I let them grow all over the place, and then I chop them down, and I'm cutting down the biomass canna. That's what I call the canna musifolia, because we use it as a chop and drop in the grocery rows. We discovered it on accident because a neighbor had a bunch of them that had been thrown out by the side of the road, and somebody said, you should pick some of those up and plant them. So I just said, well, why not? And I planted them, and they ended up making a lot of biomass and growing quickly. So now they're the biomass canna. I don't have as much chop and drop sometimes in the grocery row garden because we've often got the area filled up with vegetables and other things in between the plants. But this year, because we didn't get around to it and the cannas are already in there on purpose, the lettuce is just filled in the gaps, and I could probably eat them, but they're pretty bitter. But they make a decent amount of mass there, and as you can see, we've really covered the ground around this little loquat. So the first thing is get in there, free this thing up, do the chop and drop, and get some cover on the ground, which also feeds it. And then what I do is I actually start pruning the tree itself. This one had suckers near the ground, so I'm removing the suckers. I didn't get them as close to the ground as I should. You should really cut them off pretty closely, but mosquitoes are eating me, and I'm just making excuses at this point. I need to get in there around the base of this thing, really down low, but there's little stumps and stuff of cannas and things. So I just cut them really low, and if they come back, I'll cut them off again. And then what I do is I shape it up, and I take branches that are crossing through the middle, or branches that don't look like they would be good fruiting branches, and then I go to the top as well and prune for height. And then, every branch that I take off becomes chop and drop too. So all of this is going to feed the soil. I want this constant sponge of forest floor at the base of my trees in the food forest and in the grocery row garden. And the grocery row garden is just a more intense food forest. It takes more effort because I'm trying to keep the trees small and continue to grow vegetables around them. So it is a series of forest edges. So I'm constantly trying to get as much mass as possible. But in this system, I often bring in mulching materials. But anytime I can use mulching materials that are already available in the system, like the branches off of the trees that I cut down, or the weeds that show up, or the cannas that we planted on purpose, or somebody asked me about the bananas that are in this system. What would I use those Japanese fiber bananas for? Well, I was enjoying the videos on syntropic agroforestry, syntropic agriculture, and I liked how they were using their bananas as a chop and drop after they harvested the fruit, and I've done that down in the tropics. But here I don't have a banana that's actually going to carry through and make fruit here, but this is a very cold, hardy banana that does not make a useful edible fruit. So I thought, why not just put it in as a chop and drop? But the thing is I keep dividing them up and then selling some of the little pups in my nursery, so I haven't actually used them for chop and drop very much, other than just slashing leaves down and using them as kind of a weed block and then mulching over the top of them. So what I'm doing here, just to finish up, is getting this thing down to the right height. I don't want it to get too big and shade the system. And you can see, look at all that chop and drop down at the base. And look at that nice looking little loquat. The next plant I'm working on here is a Nanking cherry. The Nanking cherry is a bush cherry. It makes a sweet to sour fruit. The ones that I've had have generally been towards the sour end of the spectrum, which is really good for pies. And there are very few cherries that will actually grow here. Like the real cherries are not recommended for here at all. It's not so much the chill hours as it is the issue with them getting diseases and getting burned up in the sun and having problems. So I discovered, thanks to Sam Singleton, that the Nanking cherry was fruiting all the way down near the Ocala area of Florida, which is about a half a zone warmer than me. And this thing goes all the way up to zone 3. So if you're looking for a shrub that is a productive cherry, or if you have trouble growing cherry in your area, or you want just something you can throw into corners as a bush or around the edges of your yard as a hedge, the Nanking cherry is a really good one. I'm also using the branches that are hanging over the path from this mulberry here as chop and drop. I've got lots and lots of branches I can use as I prune that thing out, but the sickle is not so good for that. And here we go. That is what the Nanking cherry looks like once it's been cleaned up and mulched. Our next tree here is a Honeycrisp apple. I don't know that Honeycrisp apples are actually going to do well here, but this tree is really happy. It has made one apple so far that was a little bitty thing and was not worth eating, but my wife planted this tree, and there is a goat that was buried right into the garden bed, and then we planted the tree next to it, and it's grown very vigorously. So if you've ever wondered if a goat is a good way to feed an apple, yes, goats eat apples, but apples also eat goats. Sounds like a good children's book. Apples eat goats. Go, goat, go. Feed the apple. So what I want to do here is get some of this stuff freed up around it. I'm chopping down the mulberry again with the wrong tool. I would have been better with a machete on this one. The angle's not that great, so I switched to the little hand clippers and start clipping it out. I want this apple to stay at a small height. It's probably on the M111 rootstock, which is a semi-dwarf rootstock. That's what most of the apples in my orchard are on, other than the few seedlings that I put in there. So that rootstock is a vigorous rootstock. This tree could get pretty tall, probably 20 foot or so. So I want to keep it just within reaching height. So about 8 foot would be fine. And I'm looking for vigorous shoots that go up, crossing shoots, and just trying to control the height. And if you have read Anne Ralph's book, Grow a Little Fruit Tree, you know that the summer solstice is the time to prune. And I missed the summer solstice, but it's not too late. When a tree is vigorously growing and you cut it back some, it reduces the vigor of the tree. If I prune this tree before it wakes up in the spring, as the sap rises, it can actually make it more vigorous. It can make it grow faster. So cutting it when it's actively growing and it's got all of this energy up in the leaves really reduces the height of the tree. It goes, whoa, okay. Wow, I put a lot of work into that. I better just put a little more growth out this year and then chill out. So it'll grow back a little bit before it goes into dormancy. If you do this too late, you'll have the problem of it not being able to grow out the new growth and heal up before the freezes, so you don't want to wait too long. Fortunately, we have a really long summer, so it's going to grow back a decent amount. It'll harden up the growth, and it'll be fine going into dormancy. So I just go in and clean it up. If I've got branches that are hanging over the pathway, I try to cut those back a little bit. I would rather have it hanging more over the bed from side to side if I'm going to choose. And if I've got branches that are just really tall and vigorous, or they're really big and they're kind of unbalancing the tree, then I want to deal with that. And so I'm not really a pro necessarily at pruning trees. There are people that know a lot more. If you want to really study people that prune trees, I recommend Stefan Sobkowiak of the Permaculture orchard, he's got some really good information on pruning. Though for the small tree pruning, the Dave Wilson nursery guys are good. They are the ones that Ann Ralph learned with before she wrote her book, Grow a Little Fruit Tree. I'll put a link to that book below too, because it's been very useful. It was kind of one of those missing pieces in my grocery or garden idea. The idea of having a small backyard linear food forest / orchard where you could grow all of your vegetables and everything underneath the trees. That book was very helpful with it and kind of filled in the gaps, literally, because I fill in the gaps in between the trees with things that like the sun, and having some shade has been really useful for the vegetables. Another thing about the system is because it's more intensively managed for vegetables, the trees grow faster and they grow very healthy and they fruit fast. So having that extra care and moisture and deeper mulch and everything, this is much more managed than my standard food forest, but it's not managed as much as a garden that you have to till and weed regularly. It is a no-till system, and part of the mulch in the system really comes from these summer prunings when I drop a lot of stuff on the ground. So I'm actually using the trees that I'm growing to mulch the ground, which allows me to grow vegetables in there with deep, rich mulch on the ground. I have also taken cow pies and spread them all out in the fall. Just go out to the field and get the dried cow pies, lay them all over the ground in the fall, and if I throw down more mulch, I throw it over those cow pies, and then they just break down through the season as the winter goes on. And then in the spring I can just plant in there. I don't have to worry about, oh, is it too hot? Then I put fresh manure on it. Is it too much nitrogen? Whatever. And it just continually builds the system over time. And if you dig down in here, you'll find worms just everywhere. There's a lot of soil life in here, and there are lizards in here. There's a lot of beneficial insects in here, and because it's a mixed up system, we don't really have pest problems per se. The pests are not an issue. There are wasps in here, and parasitic wasps and paper wasps that'll come and they'll eat the larvae of the various moths and butterflies and things that get in here. I've actually watched the wasps just chewing up caterpillars and getting rid of them. There's a lot of things like assassin bugs. There are spiders in here. There are just an abundance of predators, and it's kind of mixed up, so it also mixes the pests up as well. So the pests will go from species to species, and something that, say, likes apples is having a harder time finding this apple because it's got a mulberry next to it, it's got cannas next to it, it's got all of these different herbs and vegetables and things growing in here. So if you had a whole bunch of apples and things that liked apples came, they would go, oh, this is great, it's a buffet of apples. But in this system, they don't really have a buffet. They've got a bunch of stuff in here that they are not interested in eating, and so the plants do better. I had somebody come through one day and he says, wow, this is just so rich and green and full of life and all your plants look really good. And he goes, what, you don't spray anything in here? And I said, no, I don't spray anything. And he says, what do you do if something gets sick? And I said, well, I let it die. But generally I haven't had much die in here. It just does well. And now you can see that I have got this tree pretty much to the height that I'm looking for, just getting the last couple of pieces in. And then we can take a look and see all that chop and drop on the ground, which is very satisfying. Look at that pretty tree. I could probably go and thin the center of it out more, but it's kind of getting dark. I got this interesting hand sickle the other day. It's an antique. Looks like they actually used a stick for the handle. It would be kind of cool to try and make some of these. Sorry about the blurry lens. The amount of humidity out here has made this kind of rough, but I wanted to give this thing a try. It works pretty well. Actually, it works quite well. Not so good on chopping bigger branches, but very good on knocking down grass and light stuff. So that's another tool we'll probably add to the arsenal. Thanks for joining me today. We'll do more grocery row gardening videos soon when we have a little bit more light and time. And until next time, may your thumbs always be green.